Good day. I'm going to use Google Translate API, which is an application programming interface, to make it easier for people who would like to learn multiple languages at the same time. Now, if I look at here, I've got a couple of languages like Gujarati, and I'm going to put phonetic because it makes it easier, because it's got different kind of alphabet, written Cyrillic or Sanskrit actually. We've got Portuguese, German, Greek, and also because Greek and Russian is also differently written compared to the normal English alphabet. I'm going to put that phonetic in as well, and then Afrikaans and Dutch to show there's a closer relationship between some of the languages. So to start off with, we can actually look at dog. Dog, let's actually translate that into Gujarati. Now, to make it difficult, then you go check it up and you write it down and so on. And what I'd like to do is using the API, as I said, it's an application interface, to automate this whole process. And how we do that. So I'll go to the actual first box. Now I'm using here Google Sheets. And Google Sheets because that's the easiest to use with regards to the API. And it's available online and free and so on. Now to define access to a function, you have to put equals. Now the first thing we're going to do is look at a couple of available functions within Google Sheet. Now, as you can see, there's Google Translate. Now, what you do, you're going to use the initial text that I want to use. So we're going to use the cell of A2, and then we're going to convert it from that cell's language, which is English there. So we're going to use English as a source language, and here Gujarati, GU, as the destination language. Now, if you don't know that GU or what is the actual little two-letter code for the language, you can use Google Translate. Let's quickly go there. I'm just going to add that, Google Translate. And here, for example, I would actually say in Google Translate, I'm going to translate from English, and I want to translate in this example to Dutch. And it will, here on top it says my source language is EN and my translated language is NL for Nederlands. Okay, going back here, so we see there that Gujarati is now written in Sanskrit. Now to do that for all these sentences, you just drag and drop, the words, and it will go and collect and translate it for you. And now let's do that for the other languages quickly. Very simple. So equals, we're using Google Translate, and we're going to use that same source box, which we know is English, and we're going to translate that to Portuguese. And once again, do that for each word. Now, using the magic of internet, I'm going to speed up this quickly and translate quickly everything that's required for each language. Now, once we've done all this, we've actually taken each word, and for example, in Gujarati, we've put the Sanskrit. For example, that is Kotaru, Biladi, Machli, Paksi, Gai. Portuguese, cão, gato, peixe, pássaro, vaca. Now, for each one of these, as you can see, skilos, gata, psari, poli. Now, this is quite an interesting one if you look at it phonetically, because this is the Greek alphabet, Aelada. So it actually is pronounced differently, Aelada. Now, once we've done all this, we actually see in Afrikaans, I've got a direct translation. Dutch, there's one mistake. They also call it a kat, but it's actually a rolpus, as spelt like that. That's normally the usage in the Dutch language. Now, you can do this with all the words and also with sentences, and I'll actually just show a couple of sentences how we can actually look at that, look at the pronunciation and where there are differences. For example, let me actually address Portuguese quickly, because Portuguese, there are two different main Portuguese, not dialects, but actually where it's used in different countries. Brazil, the most used worldwide. And then, of course, where it originates is from Portugal in Europe. And there's a slight difference. And I'm going to use one word at least to actually explain that and actually how to look at it from a olfactory, or the way you hear it from a translator. And I'm going to use Google Translate initially and a little bit deeper into that. Right, so Portuguese is the first one I'm looking at. So we're going to look at the word dog. And in Portuguese it says here, cão. So going to Google Translate, let's actually look at that. That is, says dog. And when it's translating here, we've got two words here. There's also a gender here. We've got cadela as feminine and cachorro as masculine. Now, interesting fact, in Portuguese, there's an R, a double R anywhere in the sentence, or the word starts with an R, it is a hard R, or basically an R set in the back of the throat. For example, here this word is cachorro, which is masculine. But as you see, I've got cão. Now, you can use any one of these, but cão just being the European one, and cachorro here, cachorro being the Brazilian Portuguese. Now, I'm going to also use 21 as an example. 21. Now, in Portuguese is 21. 21 from Portugal. As you can hear, there's sort of a bit, on that end, there's a nasal sound. 21. But in Brazilian Portuguese, listen to this.
21.
It's 21. A little bit different, so you need to decide if you want to learn Portuguese, focus on one of them. I'm focusing on European Portuguese. And the next item I want to look at is, so once that's done, it's actually quite nice. Let's actually look at a sentence quickly there. So if I'm going to say, good morning. Good morning. How are you? As my reference sentence. Now what I'm going to do is actually take that sentence and translate it to each language and have a look at the good morning. How are you? That should be a full stop, because it's interpreted by the automated translator, depending on full stop and a comma is honored. So let's look at the sentence quickly and translate it. So we're going to use exactly the same Google API, translate, and we're going to translate that box, and we know that it is source is in English. And we're going to translate that now into Portuguese. And it says here, bom dia, como você está? Now again, this is where you need to start looking at the intricacies of a language. Você, depending on Brazilian or European Portuguese, você is a little bit more respect, somebody you don't know very well, and that's how you'll actually say that. So it actually does that, bom dia, como você está. Now again, there is a difference between European Portuguese, which they would say bom dia, nasal sound coming through, or Brazilian Portuguese, bom dia. Right, so after knowing Portuguese, let's look at Gujarati, for example. Now, I'm going to use Gujarati as our language to quickly look at. Let's just highlight that, so you know we're working on that. Now, good morning, how are you? And we're going to use Gujarati, so we're going to go from English to GU, which is Gujarati. Okay, now, this is where you need to actually start looking at Sanskrit, how it's differently written, and this is the foundation. Once you actually also know how to read in Sanskrit, it becomes easier to learn the language as well. Now, here, this is Suprabhat, Tame kem cho. Now, Tame kem cho is somebody I know directly. If it was something that I have to say it with respect, it will be Tamre kem che. So it is different and so on. So as you can see, the sentences are fully translated. So if we actually look at, let's look at, for example, German. So German will be DE, and it will say, Guten Morgen, wie geht's? They're also very, very informal. Wie geht's? Guten Morgen. And then you have to start learning to see, if you speak to an elder with respect, it will be wie geht's es Ihnen, so with respect, you, with sort of like focusing on that. And let's look at, for example, Greek, which is Elinikas. Now, once going to the Greek translation, this is Kalimera posise. But I would have normally said Kalimera tikanis. Tikanis, directly, you know the person. Tikanete, a little bit more respect. So the important part here, as you can see, we're using Google Translate to automate the process, to give you a basic foundation, which makes it easier for us. And there's a couple of ways you can actually enhance on this. Now, there are other ways, for example, in the Portuguese side, that you can actually translate and listen to the European Portuguese and then also the Brazilian Portuguese. Those are very important. Now, this gives you a very good start. And what I would do then is normally to learn a language, I would take the first few hundred or 1,000. I'm doing 625 in Gujarati, for example, and 1,000 in Portuguese to learn the most common words. And you need that as a foundation. You can't get away by not actually doing some parrot fashion basic words. Also important for me is the pronunciation you really need to practice. And so when you speak, try to form your mouth very properly. That will actually ensure that you form it better than most of the time, not to actually try and roll it too much of any of these languages. And some of these languages, like I said in the Portuguese, a double R. I like the word car. In Portuguese is carro. Or the word toast, torradas, also double R, torradas, double R. And also a word in Portuguese, when it starts with an R, it will also be rolled. For example, a little mouse is a rato, or a rat is a ratazina. So the pronunciation is very good. Now, there's a couple of these languages that have got a very, very guttural G. For example, if we look at Greek, if we look at octopus in Greek, it will be the word chtaposi. So right in the beginning, the G is very, well, it's not a G there, for of course, in the Greek alphabet, but it's chtaposi. And then also in Dutch, if I go there, I've highlighted the word vogel, which is bird. And then also in Afrikaans, there are words like good, which is goeie, so it's also very guttural. So it's very difficult sometimes where people try and speak the languages where you're not used to that. And a very interesting thing is it depends on your mother tongue how easy it is to learn a language. I found out now recently when I was actually updating some vocabulary, and I was looking at Portuguese. Now, I'm going to look at the word in English, naturally. Now, if you listen to the word naturally, the focus on the syllable is on the first syllable, naturally. Now, Portuguese on the other side is that the focus on the part of the sent is not in the beginning like in English. It's naturalmente. So it is actually not in the first syllable. Now, when I was listening to a few people that were reading Portuguese short stories, and what I'm listening to is their actual translation and knowing which their mother tongue is. And what I found that if their mother tongue was English, the actual pronunciation would be incorrect. It will be put on the first syllable instead of the second syllable it would be. Now, if we look at Afrikaans, let's look at that. In Afrikaans, the word is natuurlijk, so it's on the same place as in Portuguese, and that's why it is when a person that actually speaks Afrikaans as a first language or mother tongue, it is easier for him or her to actually pronounce Portuguese easier because of where the accent is lying. So it's very important to understand where the accent is, and that's why I do the phonetic characters as well. For example, Kotaro, Biladi, Machli. So you know exactly where it is and how to pronounce it. Now, just as a little bonus, let me actually look at Gujarati. I'm going to look at the Sanskrit alphabet quickly, and I'm going to use one word. One word that is very nice. It is the word lotus. Now, lotus, the flower in Gujarati. So let me actually look at that. Let's actually put lotus there rather. So we're going to put lotus there, and you'll see that is automatically translated. Currently in Portuguese and also in Afrikaans. And I'm going to look at that quickly. Now the word here, if I have to translate it, not phonetically, but that is Kamal. Now, this is where we need to look at. There is basically a one-to-one translation. So every letter would mean something. So let's quickly look at those three letters there, which should be pronounced Kamal. Now, actually, let's take the first one. I'm going to just put this down without translation. The second letter, and then the last one. Now, if I have to translate that directly into each one of those letters, how it's pronounced in English, that will be Ka, Ma, La. However, if you put them together, in Gujarati, the end, if it ends with an A, it's never pronounced. So that word becomes Kamala. Or when we pronounce it, Kamal. Now that's just a quick overview of how you can actually, depending on what language you study, take it from here, automatically translate it, and get your vocabulary up. Self-study is really wonderful, and it makes quite a big difference to actually get somewhere. You have to, though, practice the pronunciation and the speaking to connect the eyes, the ears, the mouth with the brain in that short circuit.